Most people misunderstand the word discipline. They think of it as punishment or restriction, something unpleasant that takes away their freedom. But what they fail to realize is that discipline is not a punishment, it's a pathway. It's not a cage, it's the key to freedom. Freedom from worry, freedom from regret, freedom from being broke. Discipline is doing the simple things that don't seem to matter and doing them consistently until they do. But the trouble is, most people won't do something that doesn't pay them today. If it doesn't give them immediate reward, they walk away from it. That's why 97% stay broke. They want results without routine, riches without repetition. Now, let me tell you something about success. It's not something you stumble into. You design it brick by brick, habit by habit, and those bricks are laid with daily disciplines. Waking up early when the bed is warm and your body says no. Saying no to temporary pleasure so you can say yes to long-term prosperity. Reading the book when your friends are out partying. Saying yes to learning instead of gossip. That's discipline, and it's not glamorous. In fact, it often feels boring. But while the 97% chase excitement, the 3% build empires with boring habits. Discipline is the silent builder of all great lives. You can't see it on the surface, but you can see the results of it. You walk into a clean house, discipline. You hear someone speak with wisdom, discipline. You see someone's bank account growing, and behind it is a trail of disciplined choices. The problem is, the undisciplined life doesn't show its cost immediately. It accumulates slowly. One missed workout, one excuse, one more scroll on the phone. It feels like nothing until it's everything. Until you wake up 5 years later, broke not just financially, but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. People ask, how do I get rich? That's the wrong question. Ask instead, what small disciplines am I avoiding? Because wealth isn't something you chase, it's something you attract by becoming a disciplined person. Show me your routine and I'll show you your future. And if there's no discipline in your daily actions, then don't be surprised when there's no breakthrough in your future. Discipline is the root, results are the fruit. You see, discipline requires no audience. Nobody claps when you resist temptation. Nobody throws a parade when you keep your word to yourself. That's why it's so hard for most people. They're addicted to recognition. They want external reward, but discipline is an internal contract. You do it because you said you would, not because someone else is watching. And when you live that way long enough, the rewards become obvious. But they don't show up in a day, they show up after dozens, hundreds of consistent days. That's what most people miss. They quit because they don't see a result fast enough. Most broke people aren't broke because they lack talent. They're broke because they can't keep a promise to themselves. They say they'll save but spend. They say they'll study but scroll. They say they'll work on their goals but binge TV, and then they look for someone to blame, the economy, the government, their parents, their boss. But the mirror holds the real answer. Discipline isn't found in your bank account. It's found in your choices, and your choices are your real wealth or your real poverty. The person who becomes wealthy is the person who can do the right thing even when it doesn't feel good. They've trained their emotions instead of being trained by them. They know that feelings are fleeting, but habits shape destiny. And the truth is, you're always training something. You're either training discipline or you're training procrastination. There's no neutral. Every time you delay something that matters, you're casting a vote for the broke version of you. And every time you push through discomfort and act with discipline, you're casting a vote for the future version of you that's wealthy, wise, and strong. Now, here's what's interesting. Discipline compounds. Like money in a bank, every disciplined act adds interest. And the more you deposit, the stronger you become. You become confident, not because of what you achieve, but because you've proven to yourself that you can show up and follow through. That's the kind of person who gets rich, not just with money, but with character. And guess what? Life starts opening doors for those kinds of people. Opportunities show up, people trust you, momentum builds, and all of it starts with the smallest act of discipline that nobody else sees. The 97% won't do it because they think it's too small to matter. But that's the secret. The small things are the big things. That's why 3% live in abundance, while the rest wonder what the secret is. The secret is discipline, and the tragedy is, most people refuse to learn it. Failure is one of life's greatest teachers, but most people treat it like a curse. They run from it, hide from it, pretend it didn't happen. They spend years trying to avoid it, and in doing so, they avoid growth, they avoid wisdom, they avoid progress. The 97% stay broke because they refuse to learn from the very thing that could set them free. Failure carries feedback, but only for those willing to listen. And the reason most never rise is because they don't want the lesson, they only want the success. They want the prize, not the process. But success without failure is like a diploma without education. It means nothing, and it doesn't last. The people who win in life aren't the ones who avoid failure, they're the ones who master it. They treat it like a classroom. When something doesn't work, they ask why, they adjust, they improve, they evolve. That's the 3%, but the rest, the 97%, they fall once and think it's over. They hear one rejection and decide it's not for them. They lose some money in a venture and vow never to try again. They don't realize that failure is a tool. It chisels you into someone who's capable of success. Without failure, you stay soft. Without failure, you stay entitled. Without failure, you stay blind. You can always spot someone who hasn't made peace with failure. They're fragile. One disappointment and they collapse. One negative comment and they give up. One setback and they doubt their worth. That's not strength, that's avoidance. They're hoping life will be kind enough to never test them, but life isn't built that way. Life will test your commitment. Life will poke your weaknesses. Life will see if you really want it. And if you refuse to learn from those tests, you'll repeat them again and again until the lesson is finally received, or until you give up. Now, here's the strange part. Most people don't even recognize failure when it's teaching them. They're too busy complaining, too busy blaming, too busy feeling sorry for themselves. But in every failure is a message. Sometimes it says, you didn't prepare enough. Sometimes it says, you didn't believe enough. And sometimes it simply says, you weren't ready, but now you know. But if you're not listening, if your ego's too loud, you'll miss it. That's why the same people keep ending up broke, because they're too proud to learn and too afraid to start again. Failure is a mirror. It shows you where you are, not where you pretend to be. It doesn't flatter you. It tells the truth, and if you're brave enough to face that truth, you'll become someone capable of wealth, not just financial wealth, but emotional and spiritual wealth too. You'll learn patience. You'll develop humility. You'll build resilience. But if you cover the mirror every time you don't like what you see, you stay stuck. You keep reliving the same cycle, expecting something different. Think about a child learning to walk. They fall, 100 times, and not once do they say, I guess walking's not for me. They don't quit. They don't say, maybe I'm just not a walking person. No, they get up, again and again. Why? Because they don't have the fear of failure yet. It hasn't been taught to them. But adults, we're different. We've been taught to fear failure, to see it as shame, as a mark of incompetence. But that's the great deception. Failure isn't a mark of weakness. It's a sign you're in the arena. It means you're trying. It means you're stretching. It means you're doing something most won't even attempt. The problem is, schools teach us to avoid wrong answers. Society teaches us to look perfect. Social media tells us to only show the highlights, and so we develop this disease of perfectionism. But perfection is a lie, and chasing it only guarantees frustration. The truth is, every master was once a disaster. Every millionaire made stupid decisions. Every expert made embarrassing mistakes. But they didn't let those moments define them. They let them shape them. And that's the difference between the 3% and the 97%. Most people think the path to success is a straight line. They imagine they'll decide on a goal, take action, and arrive smoothly. But the real path looks more like this. Try, fail, learn. Try again, fail differently, learn more. Try again, improve. That's the process. And if you skip it, you skip the growth. You can't shortcut your way to strength. You can't pray your way around failure. You go through it. That's where the transformation happens. That's where the muscle is built. That's where character is formed. And let me tell you something important. Failure always leaves clues. When you fail, you're not starting from scratch. You're starting from experience. You've learned something that most people don't even know because they never had the courage to try. You've been somewhere most won't go. And if you take that knowledge and move forward, you're already ahead of the crowd. But most people throw the experience away. They label it as useless. They try to forget it happened. And in doing so, they throw away their greatest teacher. Every successful person can point to a moment of failure that became the turning point. A moment where they were embarrassed, discouraged, maybe even broke. But they made a decision not to quit, not to wallow, but to learn, to grow, to become more. And that moment changed everything. But they had to go through the valley first. They had to face themselves. They had to ask hard questions. And they had to do it alone. That's what separates the few from the many. Not talent, not luck, but the willingness to wrestle with failure until it gives up its wisdom. You see, money doesn't care how hard you work. It doesn't care how good your intentions are, how kind you are, or how many hours you put in. Money responds to principles. And the sad truth is, 97% of people never learn those principles. They think making more money is the solution. But they never ask the bigger question, what are you doing with the money you already have? That's where financial intelligence comes in. And without it, more money won't solve your problems. It will only magnify them. If you're foolish with $100, you'll be foolish with 100,000. If you spend more than you earn now, you'll likely do the same later. You don't need more income. You need more wisdom. Financial intelligence isn't something you stumble into. You have to study it. You have to treat it like a skill, because that's exactly what it is. And like any skill, it has levels. The 3%, the ones who build wealth and keep it, they've studied the rules. They understand assets and liabilities. They know the difference between spending and investing. They know that $1 today can be a seed for a better tomorrow if it's planted properly. But the 97%, they plant nothing, they consume. They chase shiny objects. They let their emotions drive their spending. They know how to make money, but not how to manage it, multiply it, or protect it. There's a reason why so many people who win the lottery end up broke again. It's not a curse. It's a lack of preparation. They didn't build the mindset required to handle wealth, so when it arrived, they misused it. It's like giving a sports car to someone who's never driven before. The problem isn't the car, it's the driver. And most people are financially reckless drivers. They want the lifestyle of the wealthy, but they've never studied the habits of the wealthy. They want the results, but not the responsibility that comes with it. Now let's talk about education. Most people go through years of school and never take a single class on money. They learn algebra, geometry, history, but not budgeting, investing, or financial planning. And instead of picking up books to fill that gap, they pick up habits from people who are just as broke as they are. They ask advice from friends who are in debt. They model behavior they see on TV, where spending is glamorized and saving is ignored. And then they wonder why they're always struggling. You can't live a rich life on poor thinking. Financial intelligence is about more than just saving. It's about understanding how money moves. It's about knowing that every dollar has a job. That job could be to grow, to protect, or to serve a purpose, but it should never be to disappear without a trace. Most people earn money and lose it the same day, not because of emergencies, but because of habits. Small leaks sink big ships. A little carelessness over time becomes a massive problem. The 3% plug those leaks. They track, they adjust, they improve. They don't wait for a financial crisis to wake up. And here's another thing, financial intelligence isn't about being cheap. It's not about hoarding or being afraid to spend. It's about being intentional. When you understand the value of money, you make decisions based on goals, not impulse. You understand opportunity cost, you evaluate long-term impact, you delay gratification, and those aren't restrictions, they're strategies. They give you power. But for the 97%, power is handed away every time they swipe a card without thinking, every time they finance a lifestyle they can't afford, every time they spend money to impress people who don't even care. Debt is another major trap. Not all debt is bad, but most people don't know the difference. They take on debt for depreciating things, cars, gadgets, vacations, while ignoring the power of leveraging debt for growth, like in real estate or business. They don't study interest. They don't read the fine print. They don't ask the right questions. And then they find themselves in chains, not because they were tricked, but because they never took the time to understand the game they were playing. The 3% know the rules. The 97% guess, and guessing with money is dangerous. Let's talk about investing. Most people think investing is for the rich. They think it's complicated, risky, or something you do later in life. But the reality is, you need to invest to become rich, not the other way around. And investing isn't just about stocks or real estate. It's about investing in yourself, in your knowledge, your skills, your mindset. The greatest return on investment is the one that happens in your own thinking. If you're not growing, your income won't either. The 3% make learning a priority. They treat books, mentors, and courses as necessities, not luxuries. Financial intelligence is about building a relationship with money that's rooted in respect, not fear. Most people fear money because they don't understand it. And when you fear something, you avoid it. You stop looking at your bank statements. You stop planning. You hope for a raise instead of creating a strategy. But money, like anything else, responds to clarity. It flows to those who know how to handle it. It rewards preparation. And it flees from chaos. The reason most people stay broke isn't because they're lazy or unlucky. It's because they've never developed the mindset that attracts and sustains wealth. They think more money will fix a lack of wisdom. But the truth is, more money only exposes the lack of wisdom faster. That's why financial intelligence isn't optional. It's essential. It's not about how much you make. It's about how well you manage what you make. The ones who figure that out early are the ones who break the cycle and step into true freedom. Every successful life is built on the foundation of habits. Not motivation, not luck, not even talent habits. And that's the lesson most people never learn. They wait for inspiration. They look for shortcuts. They search for secrets. But they ignore the very thing that's shaping their life every single day. The small, repeated actions, the things you do without thinking, that's what's building your future, brick by brick. But here's the problem: 97% of people live their life on autopilot without ever questioning the habits that control them. They think success is about the big moves, the breakthroughs, the bold steps. But in reality, it's the daily routines, the rituals, the quiet disciplines behind the scenes that create lasting change. You can't rise above the level of your habits. You can dream bigger, think positively, even work harder. But if your habits stay the same, your results will follow the same pattern. People say, I want to be rich, I want to be fit, I want to be free. But then they sleep in, they scroll for hours, they spend carelessly, they eat whatever's easy, they make excuses. And they think it's harmless because those choices seem small. But nothing small stays small forever. Habits are like seeds. What you plant today grows roots tomorrow. And if you keep watering laziness, procrastination, and distraction, you can't expect to harvest focus, discipline, and results. You see, the 3%, the ones who build a life others admire. They understand the power of small habits. They guard their routines like gold. They know that success doesn't visit randomly. It visits regularly where preparation is present. They design their day instead of drifting through it. They choose their inputs. They choose what they consume. They choose who they listen to. And over time, that creates alignment. That creates momentum. It's not about doing more. It's about doing what matters consistently. But the 97%, they live in reaction. They wake up with no plan. They respond to whatever comes their way, and then they wonder why they feel stuck. Here's the truth. You don't decide your future. You decide your habits, and your habits decide your future. That's why discipline isn't just something you practice, it's something you program. You teach yourself how to behave under pressure. You train your body and your mind to follow a pattern, even when your emotions want something else. Because habits are stronger than feelings, you won't always feel motivated. But if your habits are built right, you don't need to be. You'll do the right thing anyway. You'll follow the plan. You'll push through the resistance because your system is stronger than your mood. Most people live by default, not by design. They don't take the time to examine their behavior. They don't reflect. They don't ask, is this habit taking me closer or further from who I want to become? And so they end up trapped in loops. Bad sleep, bad diet, bad decisions, bad results. Then they repeat it. But the habit wasn't the problem, the lack of awareness was. If you never evaluate what you do every day, you can't expect to change your life. That's why the 3% spend time reviewing, adjusting, refining. They're students of themselves. They don't just react, they reflect. They don't just move, they measure. You don't have to change your entire life in one night. That's the good news. You just have to change a few key habits and commit to them like your future depends on it, because it does. A new morning routine, a better nightly ritual, a habit of reading, a habit of saving, a habit of planning your week before it starts. These aren't flashy changes, but they're powerful, because once they take root, they start shifting everything else. You begin to feel more in control. You begin to gain clarity. You start replacing chaos with order. And in time, that changes your identity. Your habits become your identity. You're not just someone who wakes up early. You're an early riser. You're not just someone who saves. You're a disciplined steward. You're not just someone who reads. You're a lifelong learner. And once your identity shifts, your decisions become easier. You act in alignment with who you believe you are. That's why the 3% seem to move with certainty. They've aligned their habits with the identity they've built. The 97% are still trying to force change without building a system that supports it. They start strong, they get excited, but then life hits, and without habits to carry them through, they fall back into old patterns. Change doesn't come from willpower alone. Willpower fades, it gets tired, but habits are automatic. Once installed, they work for you instead of against you. Most people never take the time to install the right ones. They inherit their habits from their environment, from their past, from their culture, and that's dangerous. Because not all habits are worthy of your future. Some were formed in survival mode. Some were built on fear. Some were created by people who had no vision for their own life. And if you never question them, you carry them forward blindly. That's why awareness is the starting point. You have to look at what you're doing, how often, and why. Not to judge yourself, but to understand yourself. Because without understanding, there can be no transformation. So ask yourself, what are your habits costing you? What dreams have been delayed because your routines don't support them? What goals remain unfulfilled because your daily actions don't align with them? The cost of poor habits isn't just missed opportunities. It's the slow erosion of confidence, clarity, and momentum. It's the subtle, silent loss of your best potential. Most people will never make that connection. They'll blame circumstances, blame timing, blame luck. But the real answer is in the mirror. You become what you repeatedly do. And if you want a different life, you have to start with a different routine. One of the hardest lessons in life, and one that most people never truly learn, is that you are responsible for your life. Not your parents, not your government, not your circumstances, not your past, you. And until that truth is accepted, real change cannot begin. That's why 97% of people stay broke, not because they lack intelligence, opportunity, or potential, but because they avoid responsibility. They shift the blame, they make excuses, they wait for someone else to fix what they were meant to take control of. But the 3%, the people who rise, who build wealth, who live with purpose, they've learned that ownership is the beginning of all transformation. Taking responsibility means recognizing that your current results, good or bad, are the fruit of your past decisions. It's uncomfortable, it's confronting, but it's freeing. Because if your choices led you here, then new choices can take you somewhere better. That's power, but most people don't want power, they want comfort. They want someone else to carry the weight. They want to point to external factors as the reason why they're stuck, because then they don't have to change anything. But when you outsource responsibility, you also outsource your potential. You can't be the author of your future if you keep handing other people the pen. Every time you say, "I can't because of them," you lock yourself in a mental prison. You become a prisoner of your own excuses. It might feel justified, it might sound reasonable, but it keeps you broke. Broke in finances, broke in mindset, broke in spirit. Personal responsibility doesn't mean everything is your fault, but it does mean everything is your move. It's your move to grow, to rise, to learn, to adapt. That's where freedom begins, but it's not taught in school. It's not modeled in most homes. And so people grow up thinking life happens to them, not through them. And that belief becomes their limitation. When you take responsibility, you stop waiting. You stop hoping for a better break, a better leader, a better partner, a better economy. You become the better person you were waiting for. That's the shift. Most people are standing at the train station of life, waiting for a ride that was never scheduled. They're hoping that one day someone will come along and give them what they haven't earned, what they haven't built, what they haven't prepared for. But life doesn't operate on handouts. It operates on principles. And one of those principles is that life rewards those who take ownership. People say things like, "It's not fair," and maybe it's not, but fairness isn't a requirement for growth. If you keep waiting for fair, you'll wait forever. Responsibility asks a different question, not "Is this fair?" but "What am I going to do about it?" That's the difference between victims and victors. One sees themselves as powerless, the other sees themselves as a participant in the solution. You don't get to control every event, but you do control your response. And your response is what shapes your future. There's no room for entitlement in a responsible mind. Entitlement says, "The world owes me." Responsibility says, "I owe it to myself to become better." One leads to bitterness. The other leads to breakthroughs, but responsibility is heavier. It demands more. It requires you to let go of blame. It requires you to admit when you're wrong. It forces you to confront the gap between what you say you want and what you're actually doing. That's why most people avoid it. It's easier to live in illusion than to face the truth, but the truth, though painful, is what sets you free. You can't build anything lasting on a foundation of blame. Not wealth, not character, not legacy. Blame is like sand. It shifts. It erodes. It offers no stability, but responsibility, that's bedrock. That's where you start laying the bricks of your new life. And every time you own a mistake, every time you accept a consequence, every time you choose to learn instead of complain, you're reinforcing that foundation. Over time, you become unshakable, not because life got easier, but because you got stronger. People who avoid responsibility tend to repeat the same struggles. They move to a new job, but bring the same habits. They start a new relationship, but bring the same mindset. They launch a new goal, but quit at the same point. Why? Because they never took the time to examine the real cause themselves. They were so busy fixing the environment that they forgot to fix the one constant in every situation, their own thinking. Responsibility means you look in the mirror first, not last, and that mirror, if used wisely, becomes the greatest tool for self-development you'll ever have. Most broke people are not broke because of what happened to them. They're broke because of how they responded to what happened to them. They let setbacks define them. They let rejection silence them. They let criticism break them. They refused to take charge of their narrative, and so someone else wrote it for them. But when you accept responsibility, you pick up the pen. You decide what the next chapter looks like. You decide how the story ends. It might not be easy. It might not be fast, but it will be yours. That's what the 3% understand. They don't wait for a hero. They become one. And responsibility has no finish line. It's not something you do once and move on from. It's a lifestyle, a mindset, a way of thinking. It means showing up even when you don't feel like it. It means making the call, having the hard conversation, doing the work. It means no more hiding behind distractions, no more blaming traffic, no more pointing fingers. You take full ownership of your energy, your finances, your attitude, your goals. Not because it's easy, but because the alternative is too costly. A life without responsibility is a life without growth. And that is the most expensive life you can live. So, why do 97% stay broke? It's not because they lack the opportunity. It's not because the world is unfair. It's because they refuse to learn what truly matters. They avoid discipline when it's discipline that builds success one decision at a time. They run from failure when it's failure that forges wisdom. They ignore financial intelligence when money only obeys those who understand how it works. They underestimate the power of habits, not realizing that their routines are shaping every result they experience. And above all, they reject personal responsibility, the one principle that unlocks every door to change. The 3% live by these truths. The rest keep searching for shortcuts, never realizing the path was within them the entire time.